I was sitting at the dinner table surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me the most. It was Thanksgiving, and the house smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Outside, everything looked warm and inviting, but inside my chest there was a coldness that had been growing for years. For 12 years, I had sent money home every single month, over $100,000 in total. But that night, one sentence from my mother would destroy everything I had ever believed about my family. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who feel like strangers. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever felt invisible in your own family, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Trust me, you will want to stay until the end of this story, because what my mother said next changed my life forever. My name is Augusta, and I grew up in a small house on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. It was nothing fancy, just a two-bedroom place with peeling paint and a front yard that my father never had time to maintain. We were a family of 4, and from the outside, we probably looked like any other working-class American family trying to make ends meet. My father, Raymond, worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop. He was a man of few words, the kind of person who believed that actions spoke louder than anything you could say. He had rough hands from years of labor and a stern face that rarely showed emotion. When he did speak, it was usually to criticize or to set expectations so high that they felt impossible to reach. I spent my entire childhood trying to earn a nod of approval from him, but it never came. At least not for me. My mother, Patricia, worked at the grocery store a few miles from our house. She was the opposite of my father in many ways. She talked a lot, worried about everything, and was easily influenced by the opinions of others. She meant well, I think, but she had a habit of comparing her children in ways that cut deeper than she ever realized. And then there was my older brother, Garrett. He was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I could remember, he was the golden child. Garrett was tall, good-looking, and had a natural charm that made everyone gravitate toward him. He was the captain of the football team, the guy all the girls wanted to date, and the son my parents could not stop praising. Everything Garrett did was celebrated. Every achievement, no matter how small, was treated like a miracle. I was different. Where Garrett was loud and outgoing, I was quiet and reserved. Where he excelled at sports and social events, I found my comfort in books and science experiments. I was good at math, really good actually, but nobody seemed to care. My report cards were filled with straight A grades, but they sat on the kitchen counter unnoticed, while my parents attended every single one of Garrett's football games. There is one memory that still burns in my mind. I was 15 years old, and I had just won second place in the state science competition. I had worked on my project for 6 months, staying up late every night teaching myself concepts that were way beyond my grade level. When I came home with that silver medal, I was so proud. I thought maybe this time things would be different. Maybe this time my parents would see me. But that same day, Garrett had scored the winning touchdown in a regional championship game. When I walked through the door holding my medal, my parents were already on the phone telling relatives about Garrett's incredible performance. My mother glanced at me, said, "That is nice, honey," and went right back to her conversation. My medal ended up in a drawer somewhere forgotten. That night at dinner, my father said something I have never forgotten. He looked at me across the table and said, "Son, you should learn to be more sociable like your brother. Books will not help you make friends in the real world." I just nodded and finished my food in silence. But inside, something broke. I realized that no matter what I accomplished, I would always be standing in Garrett's shadow. When I turned 18, I received a full scholarship to a university in Texas. It was my ticket out, my chance to finally prove myself on my own terms. I packed everything I owned into one suitcase, which was not much, and prepared to leave. My father shook my hand and told me not to waste the opportunity. My mother hugged me at the door, tears in her eyes, but nobody else came to say goodbye. Garrett was out with his friends somewhere. I left Columbus with $200 in my pocket and a determination that burned hotter than any rejection I had ever felt. Garrett, meanwhile, enrolled in a community college nearby. He dropped out after one semester, but my parents continued to support him. They bought him a car. They let him live at home rent-free. They gave him everything while I was 1,000 miles away fighting for every single thing I had. But I did not complain. I told myself that one day I would show them. I would prove my worth through my actions, not my words. I just never imagined what it would actually cost me to learn that lesson. College was the hardest 4 years of my life, but also the most transformative. The scholarship covered my tuition, but everything else was on me. I needed money for food, for textbooks, for the tiny apartment I shared with 2 other students. So I worked. I worked harder than I had ever worked before. I had 3 jobs during my time at university. In the mornings before class, I worked as a server at a breakfast restaurant near campus. The shifts started at 5:30 a.m., which meant I had to wake up at 4:45 just to make it on time. After classes, I tutored high school students in math and physics, and 3 nights a week I worked as a research assistant in one of the engineering labs, helping graduate students with their experiments. I slept an average of 4 hours a night, sometimes less. There were weeks when I survived on instant noodles and black coffee because I could not afford anything else. I remember one semester when I had to choose between buying a required textbook and paying my electricity bill. I chose the bill and spent the entire semester borrowing the book from the library for 2 hours at a time, copying the important sections by hand. But I made it. Against all odds, I graduated with honors. Top of my class in software engineering with multiple job offers waiting for me before I even received my diploma. It was the proudest moment of my life. I had done it completely on my own without any help from anyone. My graduation ceremony was on a sunny Saturday in May. I remember standing in that auditorium wearing my cap and gown looking out at the crowd of proud families. I had sent my parents tickets months in advance. I had offered to pay for their flights. I had practically begged them to come. They did not show up. My mother called me the night before with an excuse. Garrett had something important going on, something he needed help with, and they just could not make it. She said she was sorry, but I could hear in her voice that she was not. She did not ask me how I felt. She did not say she was proud of me. She just told me to take lots of pictures and hung up the phone. I walked across that stage alone, shook hands with the dean, and accepted my diploma with no one cheering for me in the audience. That night, I sat in my empty apartment and made a decision. I was not going to let their neglect make me bitter. I was going to be better. I was going to help them even if they never helped me. A few weeks later, I started my first real job at a major technology company in Austin. The starting salary was $80,000 a year more money than I had ever seen in my life. For the first time, I could afford to eat real meals, to live in a decent apartment, to buy clothes that were not from thrift stores. But I did not spend the money on myself. Instead, I started sending it home. I calculated my expenses carefully and determined that I could send $800 back to Ohio every month without putting myself in a difficult position. I wanted to help my parents pay off their debts, fix up the house, maybe even retire early. I figured it was the right thing to do, even if they had never done the same for me. There was just one problem. My parents did not know how to use online banking. They did not trust the internet with their money, and they did not want to learn. So I came up with a solution. I would send the money to Garrett's account, and he would give it to them in cash. Garrett promised me he would handle it. He said I could count on him. I believed him. Over the years, my career grew. I got promoted, then promoted again. My salary increased to over $100,000, then $120,000, then $150,000. And every time I got a raise, I increased the amount I sent home. $800 became $1,000. $1,000 became $1,200. After a few more years, I was sending home $1,500 every single month. I lived frugally. I kept my same small apartment even when I could have afforded something nicer. I drove a 10-year-old car because I did not see the need for anything fancier. I never took vacations, never bought expensive things, never lived beyond my means. Everything extra I had went straight to my family. And the entire time, I never told anyone what I was doing. I did not want recognition. I did not want praise. I just wanted to know that I was helping the people who raised me, even if they had never fully appreciated me. When I called home, my parents always talked about Garrett. Garrett had just bought a new house. Garrett was starting a business. Garrett's wife was pregnant with their second child. Harriet Garrett. It was always about him. They rarely asked about my life, my job, my relationships, and I never brought up the money. I figured they knew where it came from. I figured Garrett was giving it to them every month just like he promised. 12 years, $143,600. I kept every record, every bank statement, every transaction confirmation. I just never imagined I would need them. 3 years had passed since my last visit home. I'd been too busy with work, or at least that is what I told myself. The truth was that going back to Columbus always left me feeling empty, like I was stepping back into a role I had outgrown. But when my mother called and asked me to come for Thanksgiving, something in her voice made me say yes. I flew in the night before and rented a car from the airport. As I drove through my old neighborhood, I noticed how little had changed. The same cracked sidewalks, the same overgrown lawns, the same sense of quiet desperation that hung over everything. When I pulled up to my parents' house, I felt a knot form in my stomach. The house looked worse than I remembered. The paint was peeling more than ever. The porch railing was broken. The roof had missing shingles, and the gutters were clogged with dead leaves. This made no sense to me. I had been sending money for 12 years, more than enough to fix everything, more than enough to make this place comfortable. Where had it all gone? I pushed the thought aside and walked to the front door. My mother greeted me with a hug that felt distant somehow, like she was going through the motions. My father nodded at me from his recliner, said, "Good to see you, son," and went back to watching television, same as always. Then Garrett arrived. He pulled into the driveway in a brand new BMW, the kind of car that cost more than I made in a year. His wife stepped out wearing designer clothes and carrying a handbag that I recognized from advertisements as being worth several $1,000s. Their 2 children were dressed in outfits that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Garrett greeted me with a big smile and a firm handshake like we were old friends rather than brothers who barely spoke. He looked good, I had to admit. Successful, confident, everything our parents had always believed he would become. Dinner was served at 6 o'clock. We sat around the same table where I had eaten countless meals as a child, where I had received countless reminders that I was not as good as my brother. My mother had made turkey and all the traditional dishes. The food was good, but I could barely taste it. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. The conversation predictably revolved around Garrett. He talked about his new business venture, some kind of real estate development that was supposedly making him rich. He mentioned the second house he had just purchased, a vacation property near the lake. His wife talked about their upcoming trip to Europe, a 2-week tour of 5 different countries. I listened in silence, doing the mental math. A new BMW, designer clothes, a second house, European vacations. How could Garrett afford all of this? He had dropped out of college. He had never held a steady job for more than a few years. Where was all this money coming from? And then my father turned to me. "So, Augusta," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of disappointment. "When are you going to be successful like your brother? When are you going to make something of yourself?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Successful like my brother. I was a senior engineer at one of the most respected technology companies in the country. I made more than enough money to live comfortably. I had worked my way up from nothing with no help from anyone. Before I could respond, my mother chimed in. She was smiling, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile she always wore when she was about to say something that would hurt. "Your brother has done so well for himself," she said. "You should learn from him. You know, sweetheart, you will never be as good as Garrett. You should just accept that." Something inside me snapped. For 30 years I had accepted their favoritism. I had swallowed my pride, worked in silence, and never asked for anything in return. I had sent them money every single month for 12 years, sacrificing my own comfort to make their lives easier. And this was how they saw me, as a failure. As someone who would never measure up to Garrett. I stood up from the table slowly. My hands were trembling, but my voice was steady. "If that is how you feel," I said, "then tell Garrett to pay all the bills. I am not sending money anymore." The room went silent. My mother's face went pale. "What money?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have never received a single dollar from you." I stared at her. Then I stared at my father, who looked equally confused. Then I looked at Garrett, who was suddenly very interested in his plate of food. "What do you mean you never received anything?" I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. "I have been sending money to Garrett every month for 12 years. Over $143,000. He was supposed to give it to you." My father stood up. "That is impossible. Garrett never gave us anything. He told us you forgot about us the moment you left for Texas." I walked around the table and held my phone in front of their faces. Bank statements, transaction records, 12 years of monthly payments all sent to Garrett's account. $1,000 here, $1,200 there, $1,500 for the past several years. It was all documented, every single penny. My mother started crying. My father's face turned red, then purple. They both turned to look at Garrett. He was trapped. His face was flushed, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. His wife's expression had shifted from confusion to horror as she began to understand what was happening. "I can explain," Garrett stammered. "I was going to tell you. I was holding it for them. I was going to give it back." "Give it back?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You bought a BMW with my money. You bought a second house with my money. Your wife's designer bags, your children's fancy clothes, your European vacation, all paid for with money I sent to help our parents." The truth was finally out. 12 years of deception exposed in a single moment. My brother, the golden child, the favorite son, had stolen from our family. He had taken my sacrifice and used it to build a fake life, all while letting our parents believe I had abandoned them. My mother could not stop sobbing. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. And Garrett sat there with nothing to say, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. I did not scream. I did not throw things or make dramatic accusations. I simply stood there, letting the silence do the work for me. 12 years of questions had finally been answered, and the answer was worse than I ever could have imagined. "You have 30 days, I said to Garrett, my voice cold and measured. 30 days to pay back every cent or I will take you to court. I have documentation of every single transaction. Bank records do not lie." Garrett tried to protest, tried to explain, tried to make excuses, but nobody was listening anymore. His wife had already left the table, probably calling her lawyer. My parents sat frozen, unable to process the betrayal of their beloved son. I turned to my mother and father. "I love you both," I said. "I always have. That is why I sent money every month, even when you never once asked about my life, even when you never came to my graduation, even when you told me I would never be as good as my brother. But I cannot keep being invisible. I deserve to be respected, and I refuse to accept anything less." Then I walked out the door. I did not look back when my mother called my name. I did not stop when my father shouted after me. I got in my rental car and drove away from that house, from that neighborhood, from all the years of feeling like I was never enough. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Garrett was forced to sell his vacation home to pay me back. It was not enough, so he had to take out loans, liquidate investments, and sell his precious BMW. His wife filed for divorce when she discovered that their entire lifestyle had been built on stolen money and lies. She took the children and moved to her parents' house. My parents cut off all contact with Garrett. For the first time in their lives, they saw him clearly, not as the golden child, but as the con artist he had always been. They called me crying, apologizing, begging for forgiveness. They said they had been blind. They said they never knew. I did not rush to forgive them. Forgiveness is not something that can be forced or hurried. But I did not shut them out either. We started talking on the phone once a week. Real conversations, not just updates about Garrett. For the first time, my mother asked about my job, my friends, my life in Texas. My father told me he was proud of me, words I had waited 30 years to hear. 3 months after that Thanksgiving, I received a handwritten letter from my father. His handwriting was shaky, and there were water stains on the paper that I suspected were tears. He wrote about his regrets about how he had failed me as a parent, about how he wished he could go back and do things differently. He said he understood if I never fully forgave him, but he wanted me to know that he loved me and always had, even if he had done a terrible job of showing it. I kept that letter. I still have it. As for me, I used the money Garrett paid back to put a down payment on my own house. Nothing fancy, just a nice place in a quiet neighborhood where I could finally feel at home. I started dating a woman named Sophie, someone I met at a coffee shop near my office. She was kind, thoughtful, and she saw me for who I really was. Not as a failure compared to some golden brother, but as a man who had built himself from nothing. I learned something important through all of this. Sacrifice does not mean letting people take advantage of you. Love should never come at the cost of your self-respect. And sometimes the only way to heal is to stand up and say, enough. I do not hate Garrett. Hate takes too much energy, and I have better things to do with my life. I feel sorry for him honestly. He had everything handed to him and still wanted more. Now he has nothing, and he has no one to blame but himself. I am not trying to be better than anyone anymore. I spent too many years chasing approval from people who were never going to give it. Now I just focus on being the best version of myself. I work hard, I treat people with kindness, and I set boundaries that protect my peace. That is my victory. Not money, not status, not proving my parents wrong. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing who I am and being proud of that person. If you are watching this and you feel invisible in your own family, if you are constantly compared to someone else and found lacking, I want you to know something. You are enough. Your worth is not determined by the opinions of people who refuse to see you clearly, and you have every right to stand up and demand respect even from the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. So here is my question for you. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below, because I believe we all have something to learn from each other. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share this video with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we deserve better. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community. I wish you the courage to stand up for yourself, the wisdom to set healthy boundaries, and the peace that comes from knowing your true worth. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you are more valuable than anyone has ever told you.